United Nations experts urge a new U.S. administration to address violations committed against remaining inmates in the notorious Guantanamo Bay prison. Experts pointed out that many of the prisoners are now old and vulnerable, and after what they call years of unending torture and deprivation of freedom. They're demanding a transparent review of the operations in the offshore facility. Experts added that practices at Guantanamo Bay breach of international law. They described the situation faced by prisoners as Kafkaesque, stressing that they should receive adequate compensation. The White House had earlier said that President Joe Biden will seek to close the center during his tenure. The infamous prison was opened under former President George W. Bush in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. Joining us now for this news review is Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from Bristol, and Daniel Lazar, journalist and author, joining us out of New York. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess we'll start there in Bristol with you, Tony. Hope you're safe and doing well. Always a pleasure to get your perspective on things. Your thoughts on Guantanamo Bay, where it's been, what it stands for, all the controversy the government is willing to absorb and still keep it open.
Well, one of the first things I'd like to do is pay tribute to a fellow freelance journalist here in Britain, a colleague of mine, Andy Worthington, who's done some absolutely forensic investigative journalism on the abhorrent, disgusting behaviour by the United States over in Guantanamo Bay, which, of course, many people forget is actually part of Cuba. It was a naval base which the Cuban Revolution never managed to take over. And so it's doubly disgusting. The Americans have not got the guts to do it on their own soil, under their own laws. And it's clearly an attempt to do this outside the law. You know, we're talking about a rather amazing technique here now, used in order to, and it's not, of course, just this prison, law. So this is one of the tactics as part of the so-called war of terror, is for the United States to have lots of these prison facilities in places where the Americans' laws even do not apply. In fact, basically the only law applies in there is the law of the jungle. Tony Blair, of course, was involved in the process to kick all of this off in Iraq, the illegal war, but mainly in Afghanistan. The Afghan campaign is one of the reasons why, which filled most of the inmates in Guantanamo Bay. We had in Britain here a terrific SAS soldier blew the whistle many years ago about what was going on. They were being given bounties for collecting people potentially be suspects. They hadn't committed any crime, but they might be stragglers in a village that they'd been overrunning, and they would then simply put these on the extraordinary rendition flights, well, arrest them at gunpoint, put them on a rendition flight and send them to Guantanamo or one of these other special jails. Well, it then turned out that most of these people had committed no crimes whatsoever, apart from that they were Muslim. And as a result of this, they were then put in these various kind of torture chambers, and some of them were tortured, others weren't, and they were recruited, many of them, through this program known as, through the Beatles songs, the British pop band songs, Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, and the ones who were, shall we say, had integrity would not become American agents, and they were put on the Strawberry Fields program. They stayed in jail, and the Penny Lane program was for those who decided that they would sell their souls and get out of jail in order to work for US intelligence cover. So, and of course there's the torture as well. We had Shakarama is the most famous case in Britain, 15 years he was in Guantanamo. He had committed no crime whatsoever, and he was tortured. So, and there were many others too. The key people involved in all of this, it wasn't just the US CIA, etc. This was MI6. MI6 officers were flying from London to be involved in torture over at Guantanamo. So it's about time this place was shut. Obama promised to do it in 2009, and by 2007, when he left, he still hadn't done it. So maybe Biden can have a second bite of the cherry. Of course it must be closed down, and actually all of the US military in Guantanamo Bay should please just sail home and give it back to the Cubans.
Thank you, Tony. And Daniel, I'd like to welcome you to the program. Now, Daniel, you know, that infamous label, that tag, enemy combatant, you get that on your file and you're through. You could be kept at one of these black ops sites off American soil with no charge, no trial, indefinitely, no family visits, no attorney, no representation, and that's aside from being subject to Tony's point to all kinds of torture. Your thought on what Guantanamo stands for?
This kind of category of a non-combatant prisoner, because it was patently illegal, and the Bush administration was out to break the law, to demonstrate that it could break the law, that it was not bound by any notion of legality. It was allowed to take extraordinary measures in order to combat what it said was terrorism. And so the Guantanamo Bay is itself a challenge to any kind of concept of legality or democratic accountability. But that's they did it because they're at war with those concepts.
Right, but we also saw the CIA, during Obama's tenure, basically share some pretty shocking stuff with respect to waterboarding and a lot of different kinds of torture that are taking place down there. But the government kind of brushed it under the carpet. Why not clean it up? Why not bring these people on U.S. soil so you don't have a guy that's there for 15 years with no charge, with no proof, with no trial, and then basically you just say, sorry, bud, and send him back to his wife and kids 15 years older?
Well, they obviously should. I think I agree with you entirely that it's criminal that they don't. But the U.S. Congress voted, I believe, twice to prevent the transfer of any Guantanamo prisoners to the U.S., the United States proper, the U.S. mainland, because they didn't want citizens exposed to the danger that they might pose, or because they didn't want to be seen as soft on terrorism, or because they simply agree with the Bush administration's challenge to the very notion of law, of legality or illegality, and democratic accountability. As I said, the Congress backed the Bush administration's efforts to place itself outside the law. This is a very serious thing. I mean, essentially, the U.S. system, the U.S. constitutional system, opened up a big gap in the whole idea of legal accountability by creating Guantanamo Bay, and it opened a big gap because it wanted to. It wanted to challenge the very idea of democratic accountability. It was a small but significant step toward towards American dictatorship.
Thank you, Daniel. And Tony, I'm going to let you get the last word. And the funny thing is, even if you want to say the means or the results justify the means, you'd have to kind of make the case that, okay, there's some awesome intel that was derived from Guantanamo Bay inmates over the last God knows how many years, basically, which led to the deterrence of this attack and that attack. And we haven't even seen that. We haven't even seen concrete evidence. We've seen the opposite. We've seen people come out of there and they're disgusted by the torture they saw take place there, and the fact that it's nothing substantive. Your final thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, look, there was no intel came out of Guantanamo Bay. I don't believe there was any at all, because most of the people, if not all of them, weren't actually involved in anything illegal, just simply defending their own country from illegal invasions. That's not illegal. That's absolutely guaranteed by the UN Charter, what they're supposed to do there. But look, we've got two people here, or two aspects to this, which are just devastating. One is Tony Blair's involvement with these illegal wars abroad and the invasion of Afghanistan, etc. This guy is a war criminal. He's walking the streets of London. Not just that, he is in receipt of, we just heard this week, $22 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well. Of course, the other foundations that are giving him money. We've also got the institutions like the BBC and the Western broadcasters who simply do not call these people to account. The people who are responsible for the likes of what's been going on in Guantanamo Bay are simply walking the streets with a smile on their face when they should be behind bars themselves.
Good stuff, gentlemen. Time has gotten the better of us. I want to thank you both. Always a pleasure to have you both on and get your respective perspectives on things. Tony Gosling out of Bristol and Daniel Lazar, they're joining us from New York. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.